A Job on Planet, written by Karen Avizur, narrated by Brianna Judy.
Being on planet's making me itchy.
Sari looked at Carl, hiding a glower under pursed lips, as he shifted in his seat next to her in the SUV. That's probably just the clap, Oscar told him absently. Carl swatted a hand in the direction of the back seats as if to hit him. You can still bail out, Sari said, looking back towards the spaceport. I'm sure you can find a bar somewhere around these parts.
I'm not bailing, Carl exclaimed, indignant. I'm just saying, this ain't our usual gig. Something's going sideways out in the void. When you're taking a ship, you got options to call things off. But this truck is glued to this rock, which sort of limits things.
Do you think the plan is bad? Sari asked. Carl met his captain's gaze, some of the irritation leaking from his stance. He then averted his gaze.
Plan's good.
Good. Just remember, 10,000 credits ahead, all right? Her crewmate smirked and stared out the windshield.
Yep, my share's already good-ass spent.
What? All of it? Oscar exclaimed. Carl shook his head.
That's your problem, rookie. You got no vision, no plans for the future. You're in your 30s, that's fine. But once you get to my age...
You're 42.
You start realizing you need a solid foundation to fall back on. Investments.
Do these investments blow up? Oscar asked, cocking an eyebrow. Carl turned to glare at him.
Is that a problem?
It's just me saying you don't know the definition of investment. Movement, Izzy spoke up. Both men became more attentive, and Sari glanced at the woman sitting next to Oscar. Is it our truck? The mechanic's eyes were on her laptop as she watched the video from the camera she'd placed across the street. She paused for a long moment before nodding. Yeah, that's her. Izzy pushed the button to turn on her earpiece as she watched the spaceport's large, barbed wire-topped gate to the delivery pickup area slide open to let the box truck pull out onto the street. Two armed employees watched it go from behind the threshold as the gate closed. Sari pressed the button to start the car, flicking on the headlights. Seconds ticked past before Izzy started to talk. All right, she's coming up in 5, 4, 3... Sari checked her side view mirror as the big truck whooshed past them, waiting until another 2 cars passed before pulling out after it, picking up speed slowly to match its pace. Izzy spoke for the benefit of those on the other end of the earpiece. Hey, y'all, the bird has just left the nest and we are flying behind her. Copy that?
We ain't flying,
Carl groused. Oh, shut up. We will be soon enough, Izzy muttered. The highway stretched out before them, and time slowly passed as they followed the truck toward its destination. Izzy had minimized the window in her laptop and showed the spaceport camera, and was now watching the infrared view through the tiny drone she had following the truck. All right, here we go, Izzy said, just loud enough for the others to hear. Carl pulled his gun from the holster at his side. What's the road look like? Sari asked. Not bad. Vehicle every 20, 30 seconds. We've got him in our sights, came Jet's voice over the walkie. Leaving now. Izzy watched her drone's camera as another SUV about a mile down the highway pulled out from the shoulder, making a good pace before slowing down gradually. Once there were no more cars between it and the truck, it started swerving back and forth across the highway, flicking on the lights and sirens. The truck started to slow, then turn, attempting to dodge the obstacle, but Jet was at the wheel, and no one was getting around her. Eventually, the window on the right side slid down, and a humanoid shape leaned out. The species wasn't Federation, so it wasn't well known, but everyone called them grasshoppers. Gun, Izzy barked. The shots rattled off from the automatic weapon, sweeping across Jet's SUV. Even as the truck slowed further and continued to attempt to swerve without tipping, the bullets hit the resistant glass and ricocheted off into the night as Carl pushed the button to slide his own window down.
Ah, the memorable song of an AK-492, he mused, the wind tearing away his words. Never gets old.
Perching himself and angling toward the truck, holding the oh shit handle with his left hand and his handgun in the right, he aimed carefully. Carl felt the car's movement under him steady in Sari's tight control, to give him an easier shot. As the last bullets of the alien's magazine ran out, Carl let off several shots in quick succession. The man twitched twice and slumped, his arms out the window, the gun banging against the door, still held to his body by the strap.
"He's down,"
Carl said, pulling himself back into the SUV.
"Might be out, can't be sure, but he ain't moving."
A few moments later, the truck finally came to a gradual stop, and Jet spun her SUV around, pulling up and situating it just a few feet from the front of the truck's front bumper. The sound of the siren disappeared, though the red and blue lights continued to display across the highway. Sari skipped a stop, and she and Carl saw Jet and Torin leap from the car, guns in hand.
"State police, hands on the wheel."
The man decisively did not do as commanded, grabbing his buddy and pulling him back into the cab. Wrangling to detach the strap, he had just managed to get it free before Torin popped up into the open window and shot him twice in the chest. He followed up with a headshot and then did the same for the one Carl had taken out.
"We're clear up front,"
Torin spoke into his earpiece. At that, Sari flicked on the flashing red and blue lights installed on her own SUV. Torin and Jet ran to the back of the truck and reached into his pocket and took out the small C4 explosives package to the lock of the double doors that he'd prepped beforehand. In the light of the headlights of Sari's car, he attached it to the lock, and then he and Jet went swiftly around to the side of the truck.
"Fire in the hole!"
With a sharp, resounding bang, the entire mechanism locking the double doors shattered and they swung open. Gunshots spewed out immediately at the SUV, and Oscar let out a small yelp of panic. He and the others jerked away from the windows even as the bullets ricocheted off it. A moment later, there was another bang, and the bullets stopped. Sari and Carl peeked over the dashboard as Torin swept around the corner with his handgun and quickly took out the 3 mercenaries that had been hit by the flashbang. 2 of the grasshoppers collapsed to the floor, and 1 toppled off the edge, crumpling to the ground. Jet holstered her gun and went to Torin's side, as he kept his gun up and ready to fire, slowly sweeping it across the boxes in 2 rows piled 2 high and 4 deep. There was no other movement, and Jet laced her gloved fingers together, crouching down to let Torin use it as a step up into the truck without him having to put down his gun. Carl opened his car door and took a step out, watching over them as they did so. There was a light switch for the overhead fluorescents, and Torin flicked them on, immediately sweeping his aim back and forth as he walked through the rows of cargo.
"Clear,"
he called out. Walking briskly back to the open doors, he saw Jet turn and wave to the rubberneckers and oncoming traffic to go around, which they did. Torin jumped down and hoisted the body that had fallen to the pavement up and over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, thrusting it into the back of the truck. Izzy got out of the other SUV and plucked the drone off the top of the car where she'd landed it, putting it on the seat next to her laptop. Then she walked over and Jet helped her up into the back of the truck. The mechanic grimaced at the bodies, moving away from them. "Don't worry, won't be a long drive," Jet said with a smile, shutting the door. "See you soon." Izzy took out the EMP gun from her jacket and nodded once before the doors shut. Jet stabbed the 2 sides of a backup latch to the outside of the doors to keep them closed. Torin, meanwhile, was getting into the front of the truck, shoving the other body over so he could sit in the driver's seat. Since he was the only one with decent experience behind a truck of that size, he'd been nominated to drive it. He took a multi-tool from his pocket and curled under the console, jamming the tool behind the GPS device and pulling it loose with a crack. He tossed it out onto the pavement. Jet went back to her SUV, and both she and Sari turned off their flashing red and blue light bars. Then, with everyone in their designated vehicles, they made their exit, resuming their trek down the highway with the SUVs in the lead.
"Told you, you didn't need to come,"
Carl said, glancing to Oscar. "Would you rather have me and not need me, or need me and not have me?" he asked, leaning on his armrest. Sari chuckled. "I'm with him on this one," she said. Bringing Oscar is like buying the optional insurance.
I never buy that crap insurance,
Carl told her. How old are you planning to be when you use these investments anyway? Oscar asked with a grin. Because sometimes I'm surprised you're not dead already.
Yeah, me too,
Carl sighed.
But I do know what investment means. My shopping list includes the latest web vest and anything else made out of that stuff to cover the rest of my body.
About 10 minutes later, the vehicles each pulled off onto a side road, one by one, following it as it wound back and forth through the mountains. Eventually, they pulled out into the clearing where they'd left the ship, and the truck took a wide turn to circle back toward the open cargo hangar. Torin watched as everyone got out, and then heard the back doors open as Sari let Izzy out of the back of the truck. Izzy then walked away and gave him a thumbs up. Taking it slow, Torin drove into the ship and pulled in as close as he dared to the far wall. Turning off the engine, he jumped out of the truck as he saw his crewmates quickly boarding, except for Carl, who was leaning into one of the SUVs. Carl then walked up to the ship and gave Torin a nod and looked to Izzy.
Close her up.
Izzy pulled the lever to shut the large boarding ramp before putting her bag of gear, which held the laptop and drone, in one of the hangar's many storage boxes. Once it was closed, Carl pressed a button in his hand. Explosions sounded outside, dulled significantly by the thick, space-worthy plating and armor of the ship. Sari and Jet left us to get us in the air, Izzy told them, walking over to one of the numerous seats situated against the wall. She started to strap herself in as Torin and Carl walked over to do the same.
Where's the rookie?
Torin asked.
Right here,
Oscar answered, coming around the side of the truck, taking a seat along with them. A minute after they'd buckled in, the engines started, the ship let off a familiar rumble, and they made a vertical takeoff.
The boxes?
Carl asked. I'll assume you're asking of their condition, Izzy said, narrowing her eyes at him, not whether I did my job disabling the tracking. He made a gesture that indicated obviousness. Not a scratch. Shielding boxes were exactly what I expected. I opened one up, and protection is high quality. Not top of the line, but they knew what they were doing. Carl snorted.
They knew if one of them dented a box, they'd lose an arm. And if a box got busted up and damaged through the shielding, they'd get a bullet through the head.
When are we clear? Oscar asked. When can I say it was a job well done without you getting pissed off that I'm jinxing us?
When I got a whole lot of zeros in my account,
Carl said, glaring at him. Oscar rolled his eyes as Izzy smirked. Once the ship had exited the planet, flying through customs without an issue, they waited about 10 minutes before Sari's voice came over the PA. Notice to my crew, if you're not buckled in by now, I'm going to have a job opening soon. We're heading into FTL in 10 seconds. Each of them counted down in their heads before the familiar jolt of the rippling shockwave echoed through the ship, and they were yanked hard against their restraints. They wouldn't say it aloud, but after that was the point where Carl wouldn't have made a fuss if Oscar had said it was a job well done. After a few minutes, Sari walked into the cargo hold, and the rest of the crew unbuckled themselves, standing and stretching. Oscar, Izzy? With you, boss, Izzy replied, falling in a step behind her. Torin and Carl walked off to deal with the bodies. Both women and the medic each hoisted themselves up and into the truck. The other two men proceeded to pull each of the grasshopper bodies off the truck, none too gently, to put on ice for the remainder of the journey. Which one do we check first? Izzy asked, her eyes scanning them. Help me get this one down, Oscar said, motioning to the two boxes closest to him. Izzy did so, each of them holding the handles tightly and lowering it slowly. Oscar then opened the top of the shielding and pressed a few buttons on the console before he paused thoughtfully. This one works. Why that one? Sari asked. Look, he pointed to the metadata on the screen, everything from the alien's name and species to allergies. Yeah, okay. Pulling back the covering, Oscar pushed down a button on the top until it beeped, and the capsule opened, the latch letting the lid rise to the left, revealing a Tridaloo, coming out of stasis, a purple alien about half the size of the average human being. The data labeled it as a male with a human age equivalent of 40. Tridaloo were new to the galaxy. Recently, the Galactic Federation had, to their horror, needed to declare a security nightmare that some ships that had gone missing had been targeted and hijacked and their crew abducted. The reason being, Trittaloo flesh had been discovered impossibly delicious to anyone twisted enough to eat them, which was likely the last thought this alien had, as well as the other 15 on that truck, as they were shoved into stasis by their abductors. Getting down on one knee, Oscar waited patiently as the sedatives were flushed from the Trittaloo's system, and he started breathing. "Narlerf Kinterel," Oscar said, his voice subdued. "My name's Oscar. I'm a human doctor. You're safe. Can you hear me?" The basic medical stats were still displayed on the panel, since the Trittaloo hadn't moved out of the conforming foam yet. His breathing sped up, and Oscar saw some twitching in his muscles. Waiting patiently, after a few more seconds, the alien's heartbeat spiked, and he started to twitch. "Narlerf, please don't panic. You're safe." The alien managed to croak out a whimper, and an alarmed, clicking sound echoed in the back of his throat as he struggled to open his eyes and blink to clear his vision. His heart rate remained high, and his twitches turned into trembling muscles as he tried to both grab at something and raise an arm in protection. "Mr. Kinterel, I'm captain of this ship," Sari told him quietly, walking over and crouching next to Oscar. She reached out for the flailing hand and caught it in hers. "Just breathe. Breathe. I know you're terrified. Just think, if you'd reached where you meant to be going, you'd be waking up under very different circumstances." Narlerf's eyes settled on her, tightening his grip on her hand, and as time ticked by, his frantic breathing gradually slowed. The clicking sound he'd been making faded, and Sari watched him work his mouth until he could talk. "Where am I?" "On my ship," she told him. "This is one of 16 stasis pods we stole mid-transit." Federation police?" he whispered. Sari shrugged. "They're hiring out for this sort of thing these days, and we like to run our own jobs anyway, so we just did this on our own. We're headed straight to Kriviki right now." "Kriviki?" Narlif said quietly, relief relaxing the tension in him at the name of his home planet. "Yeah, we should be there before you and the others even have time to get bored," Sari told him. The others?" he stammered, shoving himself up unsteadily. "Are they—" Easy, Oscar told him, putting a hand behind his back to support him. "They're still in stasis. You're the first one we woke because it listed your age as an adult. I'm a medic. I'm going to check each of you over, okay? I don't expect any injuries, but you literally just got out of stasis. We'll give you the standard hydration and nutrition packs to help you out." "There were some injuries," Narlif whispered. "Kralnit was knocked unconscious. Some of the crew tried to fight back. Protect the children." "Kids," Izzy choked out, causing his gaze to dart to her, having not noticed her presence outside the truck. She'd gone to get the water and food, the box now sitting at her feet. "How many? Are they okay?" I think so. There were 4. No one was shot. They wanted us." "We know," Sari told him tightly. She motioned to Izzy, who picked up the box, putting it on the truck's floor and sliding it over. "Listen, how are you feeling? You calmed down?" He nodded slowly. "Here, drink this, eat this," she said, finally releasing his hand and picking up and handing over water and a meal pack. Narlif did as he was told. "Med data from the pod says you're in good shape," Oscar told him. "I usually stick to humans, but I know enough about other species to get by." Footsteps echoed through the hangar, and Narlif tensed as Torin and Carl walked around the corner.
"Boss, how we looking?"
Carl asked. "This is Narlif. He's stable, getting some sustenance," Sari replied. "Once I'm sure he's got his feet under him, we'll start on the other boxes one at a time."
"Got it. We think all 16 are alive?"
"Looks like." Narlif was staring at the crew member.
"Is that blood?"
he asked quietly, seeing the yellow liquid spread across his shirt. There was also some on Torrens, and at that point, Narlerf noticed it also spattered on the floor near the exit.
Yeah, this wasn't our truck, Carl replied. We had to steal it. There were 5 grasshoppers inside who weren't keen on us doing that. Torn and I just put them in the walk-in freezer.
Oh. Narlerf hesitated before nodding and then resumed sipping at his water. Izzy turned to Carl. 4 kids, she murmured. Carl's face turned to stone, and he clenched his fists.
We sure the grasshoppers are dead?
He asked, glancing at Torrin. He raised an eyebrow.
Very. Why? Maybe we can bring him back. Kill him again. But worse.
Are you pirates? Narlerf asked, looking to Sari. The captain shrugged. Pirates, thieves, mercenaries, whatever. It's a living.
But...
Narlerf's voice trailed off.
10,000 credits ahead, Carl said casually, and there's 16 of you. Your government puts out the word whenever a ship goes missing, in the hopes people will rescue you for the reward. Rare these days, and getting rarer, but it's still happening. And we've got a network that reaches far enough to sometimes find info on shit like this.
Narlerf stared at him for a moment. 10,000. But me alone, I could.
10,000 because we aren't deranged, sofa-eating psychopaths, Carl growled. He shook his head. Let me know when everyone's awake. Or don't. Whatever. I need a beer.
At that, he left, leaving Narlerf to sip slowly at his water. The end.